So we're coming to you this week with something totally new. We're going to be coming to you with these things sporadically. We don't have a name for it. We've been joking about all sorts of hymn puns we can use, but we're going to be talking about some of the great songs of faith. And this week we have chosen the song for the Reformation Church, the song often referred to as the battle hymn of the Reformation, A Mighty Fortress is Our God. So this is Talking Hymns with Shane and Tim. A Mighty Fortress is Our God. It's the biggie. We're starting it with it right at the beginning, probably the most popular hymn, at least from the Reformation catalog. Tell me a little bit about your history with that. You grew up Lutheran, right?
I grew up Lutheran and went to Lutheran's grade school, high school, an exemplary Lutheran. And so that hymn was absolutely ingrained in us. We could sing it in our sleep.
Yeah, and not only because it's well known, the part I probably should have said, I buried the lead here, it's because it's Martin Luther's hymn.
Right.
It's a very well known Martin Luther hymn. So this is
sort
in
of
your
assuming,
DNA.
Yeah, we already assumed.
If we were to run a DNA test on you, they would somehow find the patterns of this in your DNA. I think that's reasonable to conclude.
Correct.
This is the one that has a lot of history to it. Some of it true, some of it false.
Correct.
And the one that we're going to talk about here is I had always heard that Luther wrote the lyrics, but then he stole a bar tune.
I heard the same thing.
Okay, yeah.
And I kind of like the idea.
I do too. But sadly, apparently, it's not true, right?
Evidently, he wrote the music as well as the text. And of course, remember the text that we're reading is a translation. I mean, of course, he would have written it in German. But yeah, I didn't realize until we started this particular hymn research that it wasn't a bar song. So I knew nothing about that until last week. So
yeah, it's very impressive that he writes these lyrics that stand the test of time, but he writes a melody that stands the test of time.
Right.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and it's a great hymn.
So one of the things we were talking about before is that this is one that we might hear differently than maybe Luther in his original intent wrote it. And what I mean by it is this: I hear it and I hear very much a rah melody, a triumphalistic sort of thing. The comparison, I've read some author that said, this is the La Marseillaise, the French national anthem. Dun, 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 dun. This is the La Marseillaise of the Reformation. It has that big bombastic sound at times, pull out all the stops at points. But Luther didn't necessarily write it with that in mind. He had a different sort of perspective on the song. What was that?
Well, he intended it, based on Psalm 46, he intended it to be a song of comfort. And as we both said, it seems that you used odd words, even though they're translated: bulwark, mighty fortress, evil foes, all these Star Wars kind of images. Mm-hmm. And yet it's comforting because it is the whole message of we are saved, mm-hmm. and God ordained this. So He's mighty. He's fighting for us.
Yeah, I saw this quote because Luther, being good friends, his good friend Philip Melanchthon, it was well known that Luther in a time of duress would say, "Come, Philip, let us sing the 46th Psalm." And so that's just kind of the influence and where it is. Thinking about Luther's life, I think some of this, the idea of fortress and bulwark and all that, does make a little sense because we're talking about a man who, for a significant portion of his life, was hiding, was being hid by, a member of royalty trying to prevent him from being killed by the papacy. And so I think within that context, I would say if you're on the run for your life, having a mighty fortress is mighty comforting.
Well, and supposedly he wrote it after, when he was in university, he was somehow walking back to university mm-hmm. during a huge thunderstorm. Mm. Had you heard that?
No, I had not heard that story.
He was scared for his life. It was evidently...
I've heard something like this. Yes, that's right.
And so that's actually how the hymn came to be. He wrote that hymn, started writing it during that terrible moment, and he promised that if he was spared, he would become a monk. Now, that was back in the day.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
Before the Reformation.
Yeah.
So he was spared, and he obviously did become a monk for a while, but...
I always thought he became a monk because he's one of those guys that look like, yeah, he's a monk.
No, he promised. It was a deal. A deal is a deal.
Yeah, a deal's a deal. So growing up Lutheran, one of the things you were telling me about was that There's multiple sort of versions of this. Our Presbyterian hymnal has the one that all of us would be familiar with, the very straightforward dun 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 dun. But Lutherans have an older, probably like more closer to the original melody, which apparently in the history of this church has thrown some people, right?
Correct. I learned the hard way.
Yeah.
When I first came, one of the first Sundays, this was when the choir processed on the opening hymn, and the opening hymn was A Mighty Fortress. The hymn book we used at the time had two versions of it. One was the one I thought everybody knew, and that's the one I chose. The one I didn't choose is the one that everybody else was used to. And we just sort of had like falling dominoes as the choir was trying to process to this very unusual rhythm, let's just say, to our ears. Yeah, it's a short, short, long, short, short, long, 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 short, long. I mean, it's all.
Yeah.
And again, growing up Lutheran, that's how we all sang it. Nobody even questioned it. That's how you learned it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, here it is. A Mighty Fortress is our God. Tim's going to play just sort of the version we know, and then he's going to play a little bit of the Lutheran version. We'll hear a nice contrast. And we'll come back and talk about how this song has been adapted and changed and evolved into other pieces in time. So here it is. A Mighty Fortress is our God. Yeah, so that was a lot different. It's very different. I could imagine processing to that would have been a little difficult.
Yeah. But, it makes for a good story.
Yeah, absolutely. That's hilarious. Now, this is a melody because it's such a broad melody. It can really be adapted in a lot of ways. And so you have a piece that you've used for preludes here before that you're going to play for us here in a second. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, actually, I used it as a postlude because it's kind of a big bombastic setting.
Yeah.
Well, it goes through the gamut. It starts out with a simple sort of restatement of the hymn, no frills. Then it goes into a cute little, what I call a trio sonata section, where the melody is constant, and there's a little counter melody that goes on the top that's not related to it. And then it breaks into this big toccata sort of schmear of lots of big, fast, noisy things.
So are you going to be, got a lot of fancy footwork on this one?
Not so fancy for the footwork, but that's where the melody ends up.
Oh, okay.
Which is kind of
Yeah, that's
nice.
Cool. Yeah. I think I've heard this before. Maybe not this version, but pieces of this where it really it's really got a bottom end driving this.
Bring out the reeds, the reeds on the organ to make that melody stand out.
Yeah,
and then it's all this over the top. So.
Absolutely. And is it just called A Mighty Fortress is Our God?
It's just called A Mighty Fortress. It's a setting by Don Husted. And I love it. I just think it's a great triumphant thing. And, it might make a good prelude, but it would certainly set you off like wanting to run.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. This makes me like want to run up a mountain or something. It's got that big, huge sound.
It doesn't come off as just comforting to me. So.
Yeah. And that's okay. It could be both.
Yeah.
Well, here it is.